Hello and welcome to your third video for this week, Introduction to Spanish online course. Today we're going to be talking about conjugation, verb conjugation. We talked about it a little bit with Sarah and Estar when we started introducing this idea of what a verb is and that it has to be changed in order to be able to use it in Spanish. It's very different than how we do it in English. So today we're going to be discussing how to do this with irregular verbs. Now Sarah and Estar, the two verbs that we talked about yesterday, were what I call, everybody calls irregular verbs. They don't function exactly according to the pattern that they have for conjugation. We're going to learn today about what that pattern is and how to utilize it, and it works for the vast majority of the verbs, although there's a fair share of irregular verbs as well beyond Sarah and Estar that you just have to learn as you go. But we're going to talk about the basic pattern, and even the irregular verbs tend to kind of sort of follow this basic pattern. So we're going to start by discussing the idea that there are three verb categories in Spanish. Every verb in Spanish ends in an AR, an ER, or an IR. So AR, ER, IR. Every verb. So they're kind of broken up into three categories. AR is off by itself, and ER, IR are kind of sort of lumped together because they usually conjugate together. Next week we're going to talk about ER and IR verbs, and this week we're going to talk about AR verbs. A few examples that we can see are caminar, to walk, hablar, to speak. I'm sure you've seen say habla español or hablo español or no hablo español. That's I speak, or Spanish gets spoken, I speak Spanish, I don't speak Spanish, etc. So these verbs that we're going to work with today all end in AR, and we're going to discuss the pattern, and then in your practice during the week you'll have a practice sheet that goes along with this, and then also some of your verb practice, vocabulary practice that you have in the car will also help you to learn some new ones as we go through this week and next week. So we talked about conjugation yesterday and how there were basic subject pronouns that we work with, and that's kind of how things get broken up into categories for most Spanish learners, how it's easier to look at. So if you're looking at your sheet right now, you'll see up top I'm talking about AR, ER, IR verbs and kind of what they are, and then down below, well, it's still up top, but down below that it says AR verbs, and we're using the verb hablar, which means to speak, as a sample to work with. Okay, now before we conjugate it, I want you to look again at the subject pronouns that we're working with, because we're going to do this with every verb conjugation that we do and every time we practice. So the verb conjugations are the ones in the left-hand columns next to the conjugations for hablar. So you've got yo, Y-O, tú, T-U with an accent mark, él, ella, usted. Then we go to the next column over, nosotros, ellos, ellas, ustedes. Okay, so just a reminder on what those mean. Yo means I. Tú means you. Speaking to somebody informally, somebody I know, somebody that's younger than me. Él means he. Ella means she. Usted means you, speaking with somebody formally. So somebody you don't know, you just met, somebody that's older. Switching over to the next side, nosotros means we, ellos means they, and it's they if it's all boys or boys and girls. Ellas means they, all girls, and ustedes means you all. It's the plural of you. So I'm going to repeat those one more time because we're going to see them every time we look at verb conjugations. Yo, I. Tú, you. Él, he. Ella, she. Usted, you, formally. Nosotros, we. Ellos, they. Ellas, they, if it's all girls. Ustedes, you all. So those are the subject pronouns. And you'll notice again I mentioned first person, second person, third person. So when I say yo, I'm speaking in the first person, and with nosotros, since I'm including myself, it's still considered first person. When I talk to you, it's second person. I'm speaking directly with another person. So that's why they have these broken up into two. And technically the usted kind of should be set up there. And then él, ella, ellos, ellas is all they. Okay? So that's why they break it up like this. I usually tend to leave them in a list, but I'll leave them in a boot with some of the worksheets just so you can kind of see it, because that's how you'll see it in books. They'll have it broken up like I have here on this sheet. But then a lot of times when I have practice pieces, it's just straight down the board, and you'll get to know these subject pronouns really well. So now, conjugation. We're using the verb hablar, which means to speak. So if I want to say I speak, for example, I speak Spanish, I have to change hablar to use it. So I take off the AR, the last two letters on it, and I'm going to add the appropriate ending depending on what subject I'm talking to or about. So for example, yo, I'm talking I have to take off the AR and add an O. You'll see that bolded right there. If I was talking to you, and it's somebody I know informally, and I want to say you speak Spanish, I would add an AS instead of an O. If I was talking about him, he speaks, or she speaks, or you formally speaks, I would just put an A on there. If I was talking about us, we, I would add an amos, and if I was talking about they or you all, I would add an an. So I'm taking off the AR and I'm adding the appropriate ending. So I speak Spanish, yo hablo español. You speak Spanish, tú hablas español. He speaks Spanish, él habla español. We speak Spanish, nosotros hablamos español. And they speak Spanish, ellos hablan español. So that's conjugation in a nutshell. And those are the subject pronouns we've looked at. That's always kind of how they're going to get broken up. There's just some irregular verbs that the ending changes, or they may change the word a little bit at its root to be able to conjugate it. But we're focusing right now on just your plain Jane regular verbs that will get conjugated like this. So, and you'll see a couple different verbs on your practice that you can learn and practice with a little bit. So there's a few more sentences down below that are written out. Yo hablo español, I speak Spanish. Tú hablas francés, you speak French. Usted habla francés, you speak French, speaking to somebody formally. Nosotros hablamos español muy bien, we speak Spanish very well. Okay, so those are also good sentences to practice, kind of helping you get an idea of how this is supposed to be used. Now, down below this, there's stuff on ER and IR verbs. We're going to be talking about that next week. It's the same concept, but the endings are a little different. And like I said, we'll go over that next week and do some more practices with that. So just focus on the AR for today. You have a worksheet that is going to have some basic sentences set up, and you just need to take the verb that's at the end of it, conjugate it, which means take off the AR and add whatever you need to add, depending on the subject, to make it usable, and then you throw it in there. And these are all present tense. So just do your best with that. I did not put down the verb definitions there for you. The idea behind that is that you can go through and conjugate this, and if you have this sheet out, quite frankly, you could use this sheet, look at the verbs on there, and you should be able to whip through the sheet in a matter of 2 to 3 minutes, because you're really just taking off the AR and adding whatever ending you need to add. Understanding the sentence is a whole separate thing, and I left that for you to do. So in the additional 5 minutes or so that you'll have with that worksheet, I'd like you to take a few minutes and look up some of the verbs and some of the different words that you need to utilize. And from there, you can finish up the sheet and then email it back to me again by we'll say Monday morning, Sunday night, somewhere in there, just so on Monday during the day I can start going through and replying to people after I get a chance to look at their material. Okay, so other than that, you will have one more video for this week that will probably be attached to the same email. That video is going to be a short video, something a little bit more entertaining, and just with a tiny bit of recap or review that I'll ask you to send me something or answer a few questions about. So other than that, best of luck in your practice, and we will see you next week.